We are addressing kind of the top 5 or 6 concerns infrastructure-wise that we hear, and the dredging is one of those. So we're going to talk about that at the end, because we want to leave the most time to have that conversation, because we know that's important to you. So with that, I want to go ahead and turn it over, but I want to introduce the entire team who is here this evening. We are joined by Rob Gertis. He is our city administrator directly under the mayor. So when you can't get the mayor, you get the city administrator, and we love working with Rob, and he has taken a special interest in Riviera Bay. We have been having bi-weekly meetings with the entire team. Rob has been on all of those calls over the last couple of months, and so I just really want to say, you know, we have a big city, but Rob is paying special attention to Riviera Bay specifically, so I want to thank him for being here tonight. We're also joined by Claude Tankersley. He is our Public Works Administrator. I think many of you already know Claude, but he is with us this evening to answer any questions at the end if need be. And then we are joined by the men that get the work done, as I like to say, 2 of my favorites from the city staff. We have Marshall Hampton. His official title is Stormwater Pavement and Traffic Operations Director, and Brajesh Prayman. And Brajesh is our Engineering Director. So Brajesh is going to do the majority of the presentation, and then at the end, all of us will be available to answer questions, so whatever you have. There were copies of the PowerPoint in the back, so we'll have it on the screen, but then if you want a copy of that as well, we can get those for you either during or after the presentation. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Brajesh.
Let's see if this works. Do you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm going to put this down just for now.
No, it was actually picking you up.
Yeah, I think you're going to need it.
You're gonna need
You're
it.
gonna need it.
Alright, so, sorry about that. I was trying to get out of the microphone. It's challenging already now, so I'm going to go through this. So, thank you for having us all here tonight. We do have a relatively long slide presentation. I'm going to try to flip through it as quickly as possible. Not to skip over too much details, but I really want to focus on getting to as much questions towards the end of the presentation, so that way I can address the details, the specifics, and what we're really here to get more information from you as residents. So let me just test this, make sure it's working. Okay. So the first, just the general agenda, how we're going to run through everything, the seawall replacement, and addressing some of the general questions that you all have had, either to the council member, to the aide, and also through the neighborhood association president. So we'll walk through some updates on some relatively current projects, the seawall replacement, the force main condition assessment, as well as the San Martin Bridge utility replacement, the Northeast Basin infrastructure improvements. Then I'll get into some of the more interesting and more compelling items that we have here to talk about, the flood risk modeling, as well as the canal dredging. Okay. The seawall replacement, 87th Avenue, currently, unfortunately, we did have a little slowdown on the start of the construction. We did have to divert that contractor's efforts because we did have major collapse on other seawall sections. But that work is already progressing right now, and the contractor should have already been mobilized on site and started some of the work on the 87th Avenue North section. The 2nd Avenue North as well, the bridge has been inspected. It's structurally good, and the city is aware of the seawall condition, and design plans are currently underway. We're working with the construction manager right now. That's where you see CM. So again, we're designing it right now. We're trying to get pricing, at which point we'll then authorize it for construction. So those 2 elements, the seawall update as well as the seawall at 87th as well as 2nd Avenue, 2nd Street, sorry, those are currently underway. The force main condition assessment. So where you see that black line is relatively where it goes from the master pump station and then connects to the Northeast Water Reclamation Facility along 62nd Avenue. That's the entire alignment of that force main. Now the force main in the vicinity of the bridge did break. But I wanted to make it clear, based on our analysis, what caused it to break was construction debris that was dumped on the pipe. We did a complete condition assessment of the pipe from beginning to end using an ultrasonic system that was shot through the pipe, giving us the integrity of the wall structure of the pipe, And while no locations were identified as deficient based on the ultrasound analysis, we are still moving ahead and spot checking locations just to confirm that. Now, I want to make it also clear that this was a part of a larger project, a basin, northeast basin infrastructure improvements, but we advanced this after that break in the foreskin. Now, again, that pipe, just like anything you dump something on it, it's going to start weakening that integrity. And because of that pipe not having its coating, eventually, because of that little nick, it's like we're all in a sort of environment here. Once that little nick forms on your PVC fence that's polycoated, or anything of that nature, that automatically gets that corrosion and then becomes fragile. That's what happens to that pipe. So that's what we noticed. Again, we checked the integrity of the pipe with the ultrasonic system. It was structurally fine, no impacts, no deficiency identified, but we are following up on that. Now to the larger topic item, the San Martin Bridge. Now, we are aware that there was a recent public meeting regarding the bridge replacement, and there was concerns as the bridge is being shifted by the county. But I want you all to rest assured that the city has already moved ahead on the design of that project. And some of you may have already received the public notice for the meeting. So we were already at that point of getting ready to get a guaranteed maximum price to authorize the replacement of our windows. What does that mean? The bridge is going to be replaced whenever. But we're going to go in there and replace our pipe now. Okay? So I don't want you all to take away anything more than we're getting it done right now under this project. So that we expect the GMP will be coming out with a public meeting to go through those details on the construction. Now, it's more of an information at that point because we want to have the CM there listening to your comments, because that's very important in our public engagement process to make sure that we get that feedback so we can pass on to our project team and implement traffic control practices or adjustments in our sequence of construction or schedule, because you all live in these neighborhoods. There are details that we are not aware of, and that's what we want to get from you. Now, just so taking that step back, I'm going to touch back on the northeast infrastructure improvements, and you'll see that green section. That's that section of the project that we advanced after that pipe broke. That was the later section, phase C. Now, the general intent of this project is to improve the infrastructure within 62nd Avenue and how that stormwater system conveys flow out towards that volume. Also providing improvements to the evacuation route, water quality improvement, and mitigating flooding to adjoining communities. Now, it's very important. Why are we starting there? We have to start at the end point. We could start at other sections of our stormwater system, but if we increase pipe sizes in other sections upstream, we're just going to flood downstream. So we have to start at where we're discharging and then work our way in. So this is a major capital project that we're implementing to set the stage for the capacity improvements for the other projects that are going to follow. Might be too short. Okay. So phase 1, 62nd Avenue, shown in red. Phase 1A was actually a resurfacing. And why did we do that? There was, obviously we had the Steve is very excited under construction. Steve was instrumental in the construction of that project that you know the business. Then we had the 40th Avenue Bridge. So we could not take down 40th Avenue North, 62nd Avenue North to resurface it. While we had all this major construction and the diversion and detour of traffic towards 62nd. So we wanted to get past that point, so we did an interim micro-surfacing application on 62nd Avenue, while it's limited resurfacing, just the sections that were bad. Just to get us past the point, make sure it's structurally still sound. Just to get us past the point of the construction of those bridges. So now once that bridge is open, we have that alternate route open, we can start over on 62nd Avenue. So that's phase 1B, which is currently under design. Now, phase 1B is currently under design, but if you may notice as well, phase 3, the condition assessment, that's the section we advanced. That's already completed. That doesn't mean we're not going to do anything. And I'll touch on that further on in the presentation. So again, phase 1A completed. That was interim improvements just to make sure and maintain the integrity of the roadway while 40th Avenue was under construction. Phase 1B, phase part of the presentation looks like the slides might have gotten skewed slightly. So within this section, it goes from First Street all the way to Bayou. Now, why is this important is because we're also planning on doing wet weather force main installation there as well. What does that mean? Is during a high rain event, as part of the integrated and safety water plan, we're planning on installing a wet weather pump station along First Street. So this is where I go into looking at our improvements holistically. So while we are doing stormwater, the ability for us to get in there and address the water main as well as the sanitary sewer and the force main at the same time to mitigate the impacts to our residents, but also provide that redundancy in the sanitary sewer system. Now this goes into a little detail of it, and again, currently, when the preliminary design, what we would be looking at on that section of roadway is eliminating the center median and doing what we call access management and reducing the amount of left turn movements to where it's actually necessary. Because right now the road is extremely wide. And because of that, we have vehicles traveling at tremendous speed along those roadway sections. Now what we will end up becoming out of that road will be more of a complete street settlement, or may use that as an example, and contextually appropriate design in that the roadway itself we're planning to counter slope it. Usually roadways are crowned in the middle. What we're planning to do is cheat and counter slope it so we break that grade and we don't have stormwater flowing into the communities to the south, flooding them, but we also get that additional capacity in the center of the road that we can install a larger stormwater system to help with that conveyance. And again, that's why we start at the end. We want to build the capacity as we move up in the system strategically. The other improvements I will do is we'll be constructing a new force main along that section that goes all the way to First Street. Once that pipe is in place, we're going to switch over the flow onto that new pipe from the existing force main, and then we'll do a physical inspection and do any lining on that force main along 62nd as well. While all that is going on, we'll be in construction. While all that will be going into construction, we'll be working on the design of the next phase. The design of the next phase is that force main as it continues along First Avenue South, First Street, from 62nd to a new wet weather pump station. Again, this provides redundancy in the system. While that is under design, this is what we would have been doing, the condition assessment. We've already done that. So it gives us the opportunity now that during phase 1, we can start doing further analysis and if there are any locations identified, and we'll start checking this physically on site. So if there are any locations, then we'll advance those into construction, and because we know that generally it's in good condition, we can address that at a quicker timeline as well. So now I'll move on to the real deeper conversation. The flood risk model analysis from surge and rain. Now, what we experienced in 2024 was flood, surge, then rain. Now, I know the question has been asked, okay, well, what's our next step? The city is moving forward with a citywide vulnerability study. And as Vanessa mentioned, the city is taking part in the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council workshops as well. But ahead of that, the city is advancing what we would call a micro vulnerability assessment, where we will take the data that we have from the Stormwater Master Plan with the LiDAR contour data, which has proven to be within 1/100th of a foot of accuracy in our analysis, we'll then be simulating that with a soil event and a rain event at the same time to do a real vulnerability assessment. So while, again, the city is moving ahead with the current largest citywide vulnerability assessment, but this project is already on the way. We advanced this community specifically ahead of the citywide vulnerability assessment. So that's the main thing I want you to take away right now, is that we've already started the funding scenario on this. So the consultant is expected to give us initial assessments within 60 days. Now that is compounding information. Again, tidal and rain at the same time with a fully saturated soil condition. So the worst of the worst, and then help us prioritize. And let's see how those two, and I'm going to help orient a little bit. The north-south canal, I believe is Canal 11, and the east-west one is Canal 12. So we want to see how that flow dynamic is between those two canals during different events. And the reason why this is important, why this analysis is important, it sets the groundwork as to how to progress with improvements such that the improvements are compounding on each other to provide a maximum benefit. I mean, we could go ahead, I usually use the example, you could usually try to just throw darts and see where you end. But it's better to plan that path out so we know strategically where we're going. And that's the intention of this model scenario. Now, the consultant who will be performing this model scenario is the same consultant who is part of the project team for the larger citywide vulnerability assessment, who's done approximately, well, in the excess of over a dozen vulnerability assessments accepted by the FDEP across the state of Florida. So it's a highly qualified consultant who will be preparing specifically for this neighborhood. Steve can probably get this presentation. So, dredging. There are generally three major categories of dredging. You have mechanical, hydraulic, and suction. Generally, unless you anybody watches, what is that? Where they go dive for suction for the gold.
Gold Rush.
Yeah.
Right.
Anybody watch
My
that?
husband watches
We're not
that.
doing that, yeah. We can't do suction. Bering Sea gold.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're not doing Bering Sea gold. We can't do suction because it's time consuming. There may be opportunities. Again, we typically will bid this out with not controlling means and methods, but trying to control the impacts on our residents. There may be contractors and vendors and entities who can perform suction at a larger scale, who may be cost beneficial on a bid coming in. But again, we try to control our bids for impacts on our community and not control means and methods. Those are two different things, because we want to make sure we get it done as quickly, efficiently, but the least amount of impact and best benefit to our residents. So, a little bit about the mechanical dredge. This is generally what you're going to see. Whether it's a larger barge or a smaller barge, but essentially a backhoe on a barge that essentially is digging that soil out, placing it on another barge that will then transport it to a location where it can then be removed from that barge and then placed in a location where it can dry out. So it's a very intrusive process. Dredging is not a simple process. It is impactful. But this is one example. This is generally what you're going to see during a mechanical dredge process. Hydraulic dredge. Now, again, another type of barge material where they have a mechanical suction head that is tuning, and as that is tuning, it is pulling that material in. In some cases, it pumps it to another barge just behind it, and then that barge continues off to then move it to a location that can dry, then be treated to dispose of. In some locations, if it's reasonably close, it pumps it along that hose to the land where it can dry off, and then they can dispose of it. So what's the potential impacts? What you're seeing there is a dredge operation. So we definitely have impacts to seagrass, habitat, marine life, mangroves. water quality, but you can see based on the amount of barriers, retractability barriers, it is impactful as far as operations. And it's a very tight channel as well. It's not a very easy one. Mostly residential properties on the north side, on the south side, we do open up to a park section on the south side of the bridge. But again, it's a very narrow channel to try and get in there. That's why we're not going to dictate means and materials, means and methods, but more when we put together the package. Now, typical permitting requirements. Really, once you get into the location of that navigation of open water and connection into bayous or open or residential canals, then you start to get into the federal level of permitting. And that's one of the instances that we'll have to get into this section, both canals, because it is tidally connected. So there will be federal permitting requirements. Now, the federal permitting requirements will be a submission to first consultation with the Army Corps. Then you do that submission. Once it goes to the Army Corps goes into a process called consultation. We then send out that permit package and that application to generally around 17 different federal agencies, ranging from Florida Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Coast Guard. You have, looking at migration patterns of, species that are critical, such as assorted fish. Then you have the manatee. I mean, it's extensive, the amount of consultation that you go through. And I will touch on a permit that we have currently in the next slide. The federal is the most challenging one, has the longest lead time, so we try to start that as early as possible. The next is the state. Generally, once we get past the federal level, the state requirements are reasonably easier to comply with because we've gone through a lot of other higher compliance requirements. And then the county permit is we have such a good relationship with the county on the dredge and fill, we can generally process those on a faster turnaround. Now, I want to touch a little bit as far as what can affect permitting. Sediment quality and disposal. That is the biggest challenge in dredging. So, if the sediment is clean, and again, we have to get down and show that cross-section of where we want to get down back to. So we're going to have to take cores. That core is going to have to be taken out and sent for testing. As part of that testing process, if certain types of materials or elements or metals show up, now, and I'll give a simple example. Arsenic is naturally occurring in Florida soils. You test for it, you're going to find it. Now, if you have areas that has a higher concentration or a higher amount of pile of silt in one location, you are going to have higher concentrations. So there's high likelihood we will have a lot of mitigation to do once we start to dredge. Now that fill material, once we take it out, we're going to have to dry it. And what you see on the top image is a treatment process that the material is taken out, it's dried, and then it's transported for disposal. The middle image is a good example of that material that's filled into large filter bags. It's pumped in there, the water comes back out, allows to flow over clean filter material or grass, and it is allowed to enter back into the air. That's a good option. The other option that you should see below is if we have to go to higher levels of treatment, if the sediment shows certain types of metals or material in it, then we'll have to do a higher level of treatment, then take that material. Now, there's two options, and it could go from either end. Usually, if the material is clean, we can use it to fill. If the material is of a certain contamination level, it can go anywhere from it has to go into a fill site to be cut, or it has to go to an incinerator to be burned. So that's the extreme levels. And to be honest, one of the projects that we were working on we had to transport that material to Alabama for disposal. So that's the extent that we may have to deal with on permitting. Now, it's not a simple process, but I just want to give that fair expectation of where we can be in that range. Now, obviously, I would like to be closer to the benefit side, but I try to be realistic as to here's what the risk we have in understanding what we have to implement this project. This is an example of a project that we currently have underway. And the little orange images, and I'll just go with the top bar, you'll see it's broken in 3 sections. The reason why is we started design. We did our course, we did our preliminary plans, then we submitted for permit, which is that green line. Sometime during the permitting process, over the next 18 months, we got comments. That was that section yellow block. We provided comments back to the Army Corps. Then we go the next few months again until we get, yep, you're good to go. Just because they tell us we're good to go doesn't mean we just send it out to them. We still have to package it and make sure, finalize, because now we have to incorporate all the comments from the Army Corps and all the other regulatory agencies, all the permit requirements, put it as appendices to the contract, and then send it out. So, you see how short the next blue line is. That's our bidding phase and then our construction phase. If we had to just do those, we can get it done quickly, but we are limited by it is a coastal, tidally connected canal, so we would have to go through that level of permitting. I would say though that we have had, spoken to the Army, but we have been reaching out to the Army Corps to try and, work to see if there are other options, given that this impact was due to storms. If there are other options for permitting rather than a maintenance dredge or anything of that nature, if we could go through other processes such as, mitigation permitting or anything of that nature, which is really why the modeling scenario analysis that we're running on the vulnerability side, but again, that vulnerability assessment we're pulling ahead for this community, that's why that's really important, to show justification of here's why we have to do it, here's the risk, these are the benefits. And with that, I will take questions. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Couple questions, because the one section that you have some pictures of that have already been mentioned is from 4th Street, on Turner Creek, from 4th Street to the footbridge.
Yeah.
And then from the footbridge up to 83rd and beyond. That section is basically follows the Rio Vista Park, which is a green park, and it's got the Australian pines and from that section at the corner of the park to 83rd, a lot of those trees are down in addition, so they're blocking the canal. So, and the footbridge, how would a piece of equipment like that dredging machine get to that area?
Okay, so good question. First of all, I would like to sit down with you afterwards so I can mark up the sheet itself and actually take some notes because this is good information. Again, these are why we're here. We really want to hear. Now, typically when we get into that type of situation, I remember a project that we did, the barge actually had to park next to the bridge, and we lowered it. This was Bruce Steffen's project. And we had to lower it into the canal because there was no way to get it. So we may have to literally pick the barge up, put it on a flatbed, drive it across, and lower it down.
And there's easement, I would think there's some easement area along the western side of the canal,
Okay.
just south of 83rd. There's a couple houses and then there's a big green space there because a road runs along that, so maybe they could utilize that for access, but they have to clear the trees and stuff out of the way first, I would think.
So that will be part of our canals county permit, because we'll do mangrove we'll have to mangrove trimming and dredging for permit at the same time. But that's a good point. But I definitely want to sit on the shore so I can mark on that area and take some input on it.
So based on your timeline, though, it's very clear that it's a long process. So it's not something that we have any hopes of this storm season having any real impact on. So we're gonna have to go through this storm season based on the condition we have currently.
So there's
From the dredging perspective,
Yes.
maybe not the other cleanup part.
Yeah.
From the dredging
But,
perspective.
I mean, trees being down, those are some things we could definitely look at.
Yeah.
Yeah. Questions? Yes, sir.
So I got a question regarding the Derby Lane project. How's that gonna affect your sewer force main and the new bridge? That just popped up in this last week.
So the Derby,
83rd and,
so the Derby Lane property is actually in Pinellas County.
Okay.
That has nothing to do with the city of St. Petersburg. It was private ownership and not in our city limits. So even if they would bring any sort of development plan or anything like that, that is not under our purview. I have not been made aware of any redevelopment plans that have been submitted at this time. So,
cause that's gonna impact everyone knows that Gandy to 4th on 83rd and San Martin is just, if that goes through.
Right.
And I know it's Pinellas, but.
Right.
An EIR would be done, right, to how that would affect the city?
well, they have to do traffic assessment. I mean, they have an entire list, just like any development, that has to be done for mitigation of any sort of construction, any additional traffic that would come through there. But quite frankly, nothing has been filed, so we don't know what they would be looking at redeveloping.
So I guess my question is, since we're working on the San Martin project,
Mhm.
and they start developing that, even though it's in the county, the left's gotta talk to the right, is that gonna affect the San Martin Bridge project? Because if they start dumping an extra 100,000 cars a month on that road, is that gonna screw up what we've been working for the last 5 or 6 years to get, the San Martin project done? Or
I would have no
what's your
reason
opinion on
to
that?
believe. Yeah, because I mean, you've got to think, the San Martin project has been ongoing throughout all of the new construction that we've seen in the area. I don't see one particular project holding that up. If anything, I would think that it would continue to move forward because that project's going to take a very long time. And, essentially the county, it's all going to be under the county's purview. So.
But in the Tampa Bay Business Journal today, Derby Lane just sold today.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So they're actually gonna be doing something.
But we have, first of all, the city has not been notified of anything because it would not go through the city.
Right.
And there has not been any development plans leaked or anything like that at this time. The sale was finalized,
But
is
just
all
to
that we
this
know.
point, If the San Martin Bridge, and it's been close to the 20 years, because
Yeah.
I've been here for 50. If it's still one lane going each way, that's a problem, if they do a lot there. Because the neighborhood bought Tallahassee Drive years ago and closed it because the Derby Lane people were coming through where Riviera Bay is now at high speed to get to 83rd because that was the shortcut. Now the shortcut is between Riviera Bay and Renaissance neighborhoods. And if that's still 2 lanes and we have that big thing, that needs to be considered, and that is city, right?
No, it's not.
No.
Riviera Bay's not city.
Riviera
Well,
Bay
it's
is, but
city.
83rd is a
83rd
county road.
is a
And this
county
is
road.
this is where we keep running into issues, and when Brandy and I speak,
Uh-huh.
and she speaks with them, is the city has no control over 83rd Avenue, it's the county. I think maybe the question is, one, with traffic, but two, even though that's Pinellas County, that force main runs all the way up to that property. Would their sewage be dumping into that force main?
We could
Yeah. Is that?
So the Derby Lane currently,
Thanks, Clint.
So Derby Lane currently does send their sewage to us. They have a small private lift station on their property that serves them. We fully anticipate that any development they would do their analysis of what their sewage flows would be, and I fully expect that they would have to upsize their lift station. If their analysis shows that our force main is not large enough to accept that additional sewage, then it would be on to the developer to pay for the upsizing of our force main. So that would be the process that we'd be going through as Councilmember Gabbard mentioned. Once we receive those plans, that we can start reviewing them, then we'll have a better idea of what the impact will be on us.
I just hate to see you all do all this hard work and get everything going, and
I know.
that project impacts you. And then, we're not in charge like this, but the county is gonna impact the city, and then you all spend, hundreds of millions of dollars improving the area, and they screw it up with one swoop of a pen, and then we're all the ones that are paying for the excess traffic, because honestly, I could see that being a 2-lane each direction bridge if they put, hundreds or thousands of, residential property, that's really, now, that traffic backs up almost all the way to 83rd sometimes when people are coming through Canyon just to get to 4th Street.
No.
And that's with nothing else. That's the only reason I brought it up. I mean, I know you're aware of it, but I would just hate to see all this taxpayer money be spent on fixing that bridge, and then all of a sudden, the next 10 years, they're dumping 10,000 residential units in there, and all of a sudden, the fix is no longer a fix.
So we appreciate you bringing it up, because it is a very good point that we need to look at. So knowing that it was, as you mentioned, sold today, and we know what the timeline is, and we'll be looking out for this. And obviously, we can come back and discuss with you information that we receive and the analysis that we get as time goes on.
We all know that Pinellas County is responsible for the canals for their primary, right? When you get a permit for a dock, they even wasn't signing anything off.
For a dock, yeah.
Yeah, and, they really, we own this is our domain, so I get the problem, but, when you've got these 2 major storms that come through and then you get on it, you can walk from the end of 87th Avenue to 83rd Street Bridge when there's low tide. You
Yes.
would never, you used to be able to take a boat in there and draft it 3 feet. But that doesn't happen anymore, and that just happened in the last year. And the issue that the county's told me is they want to attach a assessment to a property, like if they came and dredged the main canal, everyone gets assessed on that. The problem with that canal is there's no navigable waterway on that canal. It's a drainage canal for 4th Street from 79th all the way to 87th. There's not one house with a dock on that street. So there's no one for them to attach an assessment to. So therein lies the problem of why nothing gets done, because they don't want to pay for it. And hopefully with all these mitigation funds, that's a huge problem, because you've got the mobile home park that used to be where 87th Terrace has gone in now, that sat there for years with just open dust and silt. Where does that flow? That flows eastbound into the canal between 79th and 87th Street, from 85th to 87th. And I'll tell you, when Helene came through, it was a freaking waterfall. I mean, I've never seen water rush that. It was like a Category 3, boating experience. You could go through there with kayaks. It was the craziest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And then now, I was just talking to PCL regarding the 87th Street. They're starting on Thursday, is what they told me. They dumped the materials off last week, but I talked to the foreman, Colin, and their subcontractor today. But even they were saying they can't believe how much dirt, how shallow that is now at the end of 87. So, unless that gets dredged, all these folks, I just lifted my house, but all these folks around me that are spending $200,000-300,000 remodel, if that dredging doesn't happen, and we have another season like the last 2, those houses are all gonna go under again. And it's heartbreaking, because you still gotta live through the apocalypse. I mean, it's depressing driving through the neighborhood when you got 10 feet of garbage for, 3-4 months, and everyone's trying their best to make it right. And you've got the county that's dragging their feet because it's in the middle of the city, that doesn't want to play ball, and now you got the Army Corps of Engineers involved. I know that Brandy was working with them, and that took 2 years for them to get, into the game. But, we've got manatees getting beached in there now. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. I had a 30-foot boat. I used to be able to take it if you could get under the cables that are almost in the water. And that's something that you ought to think of. If you're gonna bring a dredge in there, there's no way you're getting a barge through there until they move those abandoned cables that are literally 4 feet above the water. And that's an issue that's gonna need to be addressed.
Honestly, if you have pictures of wildlife and beach, please send it to Kim.
Yes.
That would be very
That will
helpful.
help.
Okay. But you bring up other points. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Since that canal system from 4th Street all the way down, either way, either up to 87th or out to Riviera Bay, is fed or flows from Sawgrass Lake, are they gonna be doing anything to correct or readjust the turbidity barriers up there? Because I know when there's a really bad volume of rain, we'll have islands of lily pads floating down our canal, which clearly came from Sawgrass Lake, because they don't grow in our
Yeah,
canal.
thank you. I was not aware of that, and that's a good point, I'll follow up.
We get an official data for them too.
Yeah, occasionally, yes.
That's very helpful, thank you. Questions?
Would they be able to use our public boat ramp on Sunlit Cove to put the barges in? Is it big enough?
You know, honestly, yes.
Instead of trying to go under the bridge.
Well, the barge would never be able to go under the bridge.
Okay.
So generally, if there's an access point that we can utilize, we try to utilize it, public right of way, public park, if we have to, and restore it, or say we'll ramp up that feature. So if there are locations, yes, we'll definitely. What I would see probably happening is, you know, the barge will be placed, has to move to the other side. There may be a smaller boat just to take the workers in and out, and they may use for the boat ramp. But yes, that's valid points. Yes, ma'am?
I don't know if this is the right place, and I appreciate the larger discussion, but I'm still trying to recover from Helene and get a permit, from the city so I can get work done. Is there anyone that I can talk to? It's just
I will
so-
take it in.
So that's us, that's our department. So Kim, my legislative aide, has been working diligently with every resident that has reached out to try to see what the holdup is, how we can help to expedite. So we need to get your information so that we can add that to the list and continue to follow up on that for you. So after the meeting, we will get your information and we will make sure that we get back to you with a response and how we can help you move that along.
I'm just looking, I might have a message in here from Kim. That was Carla Johnson? No.
The ombudsman. Okay. Yeah, that's the ombudsman with the city and the permitting department, so we'll work with you on it. Yeah, we'll get with you afterwards.
Questions?
Was there an update on that traffic thing you were working where they were reducing the speed limits? How's that going?
So that is with a federal grant, and so we are working through that. We've not been told at this time that there's any jeopardy on that grant. You guys are the pilot neighborhood, so we'll be working on yours first. If there would happen to be any delays on that grant, I'll let Vanessa know right away, but as of now, as far as I know, recent update, we're still moving forward.
Let's get it lowered to 20.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
yeah.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
What projects will begin before this next hurricane season?
So.
I mean, do we have any hope here?
The model scenario is the one that will be, it's already started. So that is gonna lay out strategically the improvements and also give us the empirical information to start the permitting processes if needed.
The seawalls,
Thank you.
the
Yes,
seawalls that were
seawalls.
discussed at the beginning.
Tuesday?
Thursday.
Thursday.
Thank you. I haven't reviewed this right now.
The force main break will be fixed. So those two
Those two.
projects off the top of my head from the presentation.
The force main is fixed, and the condition assessment is done. So all of the pipe is in good structural condition. The seawall, will be started and should be done. And also the biggest thing is going to be the mall scenario that
All-
really lays this out.
All existing backflow preventers have been replaced, by the way, too.
Okay, that was gonna be my question. I was letting everybody
Yeah, and
else.
Patricia, I don't know if you want to touch on, it's not directly in Riviera Bay, but it impacts it in the project at the Northeast Reclamation Facility and the ongoing work there to try and harden that, before hurricane, so.
Yes, that's a good point. So we've advanced a lot of projects. So while the Northeast Water Reclamation Facility did have a longer time frame and some projects are already permitted, we are advancing that to strategically implement as much as we can ahead of the hurricane season. It included all the way up to, getting in contact with Caterpillar and using the state's declaration of emergency to get us ahead of the line on the generator purchase. So we've exercised everything we can to advance as much work as we can to provide that redundancy and resiliency. Yes, sir.
About the sewage pump system they had to shut down during the hurricane that caused everybody their sewers to back up into the homes. How's that been addressed?
So that is really driven by sewage. So the resiliency improvements, the plant had to shut down. Okay, so obviously most of the plant is electrical. You have a pump running, you get water in it, when that electrical is going on, bad things happen. So we strategically had to shut the plant down and cut that power, because that way, once it goes down and step on the water, and the water goes back down, we can wash it out. We can wash out and have it back in operation quickly. If we did not do that, and left the plant running, and there were examples of New York, for example, I thought they took 40 months, was it? To get that plant back in operation. So if we had not done that, we would still not have a plant, quite possibly.
I understand that, but what are we doing for the next time we're in that situation?
Good. So the resiliency improvements that we're implementing right now at the plant, the Northeast plant, we're advancing. We already had the electrical upgrades going on at the Northeast treatment plant. So what we have done is we've advanced those elements, trying to get them done quicker. But what we're also doing is, if we had panels that were supposed to be done at 11-foot NAVD, we're trying to push that up to 15. So we are enhancing what we would have been installing, and we're working to protect what we can't do in the short term. So by example, around the operations building, we're trying to move forward with implementing a stronger barrier system. And I'll use the station down at Alberta, but they're actually installed in the Northeast. So the barrier that will be installed around the operations building will have a solid footing. So that way we won't have that undulating and that risk of rollover. So those simple things can help with, because we can't raise the building in the time frame with all of the electrical components and controls that go into it. Now the other type of improvements that we're working on, the long term that will start soon, is we're working on the emergency operations building for the Northeast and the Southwest part, where we're actually building a hardened facility that's hurricane resistant and surge resistant. So it'll be high, it's at a high elevation, all the controls, all the impact of surge, so it can still operate in a storm. So for your simple answer right now, we are working to enhance the plant, raise our electrical components where we can, and secure and waterproof electrical components where we can.
And for Jen, just, the neighborhood knows, that's a significant project. Do you know off the top of your head, and you may not know, is that a $40 million, $50 million project overall out of the Northeast plant?
It is in the excess of $50 million that we're being spending out of the Northeast treatment plant.
Is that gonna cover all of our neighborhoods?
Yes.
All of this area?
Yeah. So all the
When is that
wastewater.
due to complete?
So quite a significant amount of the resiliency improvements will be done. We're aiming to have it done before the hurricane season. We are still driven by material supply again, but we are shooting to get as much of it done before the hurricane season. What we can't get done, we're going to move to secure.
I understand a lot of permits have come back for condominiums. Is the rate coming in quicker now for permits to be, come out, specifically Mariners Pass down 62nd? Or do you have the? It's not this neighborhood, I just thought I'd ask for my mom.
So when we spoke to permitting today, the post-disaster emergency permits, for the most part, are pretty much caught up to a level space, with the exception of those that are requiring additional work to it, like this, corrections, or there were things that they were missing, or if somebody was to enter one, say today, obviously that's not caught up. But they're moving towards that. I think condos are a little bit different because with the association, they're filing it as one permit system.
Right, commercial.
So I think condos are a little bit trickier because not every single unit has inspections at the exact same time or requires the same amount of work. So because that's like a whole different animal in terms of a single family home compared to a condominium unit that may have multiple buildings and or multiple units within that property. But if you want to get with me on specific, I can look into that for you.
Anybody else?
Any other questions?
I have some.
Was there been any thought of a dam
system. I know it's kind of a radical thought, but back in the old days, in flood areas, they would put dams. The 83rd Street Bridge is one that I think's come up before, where blocking that water flow during a storm, or like on 77th, that water flow, you're bringing water in during a storm. It gives it a free flow to come right into us. Is there any thought in the engineering process to do that?
So that will be done part of the vulnerability assessment. So this is a good image to show you. I'm sorry the clarity is not there, but it's on the presentation. So this is the contour relief that you're seeing for the site. There's a big challenge there. So when you look at the eastern side, it's essentially higher to the west, but also 83rd is actually higher than the residence. So damming off those sections won't necessarily work, but I think I know what direction you're going, and I don't want to confuse everybody here. So let's talk about.
Stem the flow. It wouldn't mitigate the flooding, but you could probably save hundreds of millions of dollars worth of damage in the neighborhood, you know, versus the cost of putting that water break. It's not going to stop water from flowing around and moving in other places, but it's a free flow. It comes up. During Helene, it came as a tidal wave. I was up when it came, and it came as a 3-foot wave. And if we could have broken that wave, we would have saved a fortune in FEMA money and repairs.
I would say let me sit down and get some feedback, because that is helpful.
There's a bottleneck there. I mean, if you blocked off 83rd specifically, that whole Riviera Bay this whole north area is mitigated, which saves the city, the state, the federal government, millions, homeowners, everybody. Doesn't mean everybody's saved, but it does make a big difference.
Yeah, let's sit down afterwards, because I'll mark that up. I think and again, I don't want to confuse everybody in the conversation, but the semantics, I may be thinking of the way it ends, you're thinking differently. So let's chat off of it. Yes, ma'am?
Just with your comment, probably 15 years ago, maybe 20, on the south side of 83rd Avenue, they raised the seawall.
Mm-hmm.
And then I live on the north side of 83rd, and I never flooded before,
Now you flood.
and now I flood. And I was just getting like an inch. That neighborhood used to always flood on the south side down towards the park, always flooded. Then the next, back a few years ago, I'd get 1 inch. And then I got 9 inches twice. This time I got 44 inches, and I know we all got it. But because they created that dam effect, the dam happened to be my side of 83rd, and then my streets got waterlogged.
So before we go down literally, I'm gonna say before we go on that conversation, let's really rely on the data that we have from the model to help give us guidance. Because you're right, where did that come in from? You're right, are you impacted? Are you the battery? So let's really take that step back and let the model run the scenarios. Sure, where the flow is coming out, because, and I'll give you examples. If it's raining heavy in your neighborhood, that's raining heavier, sometimes raining lighter somewhere else, then your canals on the north-south section is going to push out flow faster than the horizontal canal. So it's going to flow that direction. But on the reverse of it, if your neighborhood is not falling, rain is not falling as hard, but we have a tidal influx and also the rains coming in from the western side of town, then that's going to push water into your canal. And now it increases what we call the tailwater condition in your pipe, which results in your street flooding. So I think what we need to do is, your scenario might have been in category E of how that storm flooded your scenario would have been category B. So I think when we look at the model and run the multiple scenarios, we'll have the best solution to mitigate the impacts here now.
I agree, but I guess nobody bothered modeling when they did it 20 years ago or 15 years ago, because I've been there over 25 years and I never had it until 2020.
That is such a good point.
Different AI at that time.
Yeah. I think it was still it was the AI yet. So everybody remember dot matrix that was okay. That was a model. That was when I started twice. I've been an engineer 21 years. And in that time, I will tell you that the models that was scenario done before was literally dust. And where we are now is what you see on the screen. I can see within 100th of a foot of accuracy. Now, let's take a step further back. And I always tell my staff this when we are planning our projects. The city was developed in the 1920s, redeveloped in the 1950s. Back then, a lot of the permitting and requirements that we have now for modeling and design scenarios did not exist. 18-inch pipe, I think that's gonna work. That's pretty much what happened. So, essentially, yes, that neighborhood when it was developed under that scenario of just basically what we think that size will handle. Then comes along modeling, I mean, yes, we are bringing up the conversation of Army Corps. Army Corps came about because of the issues of dredging and impacts to waterways of the Clean Water Act, and that's what pushed the dredging permit requirements to a higher level of regulation. So, you know, I get what you're saying, but when it was developed, you know, yeah, it's right. I mean, I'm not going to take away from that. You're right. Any other questions?
I'm gonna go right quick. On your flood risk model analysis for the neighborhood-specific vulnerability assessment, what is the timeline on that?
6 weeks.
And starting?
So, 6 weeks starting last Thursday.
Okay, so
Yes,
it'll be
so-
done before summer, okay. And then, I know you need this,
6 weeks for us to get our preliminary data analysis in.
preliminary.
And then we'll go through it with the consultant and make sure what makes sense. We're gonna validate, yes. You know, the comments you tell me during the storm event, you see flooding in this location. That's the sort of stuff that I will take back now. I'll say, during our 10-year or 100-day event, we see flooding here. Your models are not showing it.
That's why in Cyclic Fix, we were asking for the high water event, your observations, because in Cyclic Fix, we're using that to validate the model.
Okay.
Correct. When we developed the stormwater master plan, which is this data here, every single cyclic fix that we had, we calibrated that to the rain event that was noted. So that's how we were able to know within 100th of a foot during a rain event. But the scenario now is we had surge. Surge is something unpredictable. Surge is something that we have now taken. So now we have the rain data, and now we're going to couple it with cycle data. And then we're going to have a comprehensive model for the question you asked. That's right.
And I guess the other thing was, you have 6 weeks, then you get with the consultant, then we come up with a plan, then we're already in hurricane season. So what about the current flooding that's happening on sunny days just from tidal flow? I know
So
that's more a Marshall question, but I thought I'd bring that up.
already mentioned that affluent is on so.
Okay.
And we did take some comments from a few residents as far as locations that they're seeing more frequency of it. So we'll definitely be following up, and I can't stop encouraging, if you see these events during a rainy event or that sunny tide event, let us know. Because only when we know, we can address it. And I'll tell you one thing, as another thing as well. It will be good not just to send a picture, but give us the time.
Okay.
Because what we get pictures, we took this picture when, last week, okay, well, we don't know what time that was. But if you tell us the picture, took this picture on Wednesday at 11 o'clock, we could take a look at the tidal charts and we know, okay, this is our issue at this location. Or we can look at the rain event during that time and know what the impacts are. So time and date is very, very helpful.
So repeatedly reporting the same locations is going to be helpful?
Yes.
Okay. Because I think what I see, just because I get the updates from ClickFix on everything in the neighborhood, and I scroll through them on a weekly basis, is same issue as this number, mark closed. Same issue as this number, mark closed. I reported one during our Adopt a Mile that I ran across, and it's like, we're doing an assessment, marked it closed. So I feel like if we tell everybody, just keep doing it, because people feel like, oh, nothing's happening, so they quit reporting. So if it's keep reporting it,
So
we'll let everyone know.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
bring up a good point. So if
Okay.
it's something that, on the operational side,
Yeah.
if they need us to step in on the capital side and start modeling, if they are not seeing benefit and improvements, so
Okay.
yes, they may have addressed it, and then this issue is still there.
Mhm.
And then it'll become at a point that, okay, well, they've tried everything.
Okay.
Let's get engineering involved.
Okay.
Let's see if we have to model it, resize it, we have something else.
So we try to maintain the system as existing, what it's supposed
Right,
to be doing.
yeah.
And then it gets to a point where it just can't, the system can't handle. Sure.
Yeah.
Sorry. We're trying to do everything we can operationally to maintain the system as intended. But as we spoke before, let's develop a different criteria. Once it gets to a point where what we're experiencing is overwhelming the system, you get the modeling and engineering involved. Say, hey, this is what we're observing. We've done everything we could operationally. That includes pumps if we can. We really try to get creative with the support of administration, really trying to, and also the council member. We're really trying to do what we can. We think as much as outside the box we can to see what we can get out of the system. Eventually, it can only carry so much water, so we have to find another way. And that's when we get engaged in engineering. Yes, ma'am.
The corner of 83rd and Riverside Drive North, not northeast.
Yes.
The hole they created, and they put the tent over, and the hole's been they've been doing stuff. What are they doing?
So we have, we're testing out what we call a knife gate. So you're talking about the northeast corner? Or northwest corner?
Northwest corner.
Yeah. That's where we put a device in where it cuts off flow of water back into the system. So it literally drops a gate, a floodgate, barrier gate down in that pipe to not allow the water back in. So the water won't flow. It stops the water from going out to the bay or the canal, but also prevents the water from coming in. We also put a backflow preventer on top of it, where if the knife gate fails, it still won't allow the canal water to go back into the street. But we, again, trying to pilot project to see, we have an intelligence system there called SCADA data, but it allows us to remotely watch if it's able to open and close. So another way we built a box that we call a vault that allowed us to put this knife gate in to prevent the water from getting back into the neighborhood.
Yeah, it just seems like there's a bunch of guys there.
Yes.
And then they go away.
Yes.
And then they come back and there's a tent.
Right.
And a bunch of guys.
I'll
and they go
explain
away,
it.
And then they come back.
Yeah, so we had to pour the bolt, so the cement had to cure, the concrete had to cure. Then we put the device in itself, and then we waited for our technical experts, the people who are the brains behind it, to make it like automatic. They came in as well, so that should be there'll be a fourth visit, because the first one was to figure out what's going on. And then between the third and fourth visit, we also put a new backflow preventer in there. So if it does stay in the open position, it doesn't go back into the street. So we did replace the backflow preventer that was there with a knife gate and a backflow, just to test out, see what's going on.
Where does that pipe go to?
It's from the catch basin down to canal, yes, sir. It's a short run pipe.
You've seen how much dirt's in that canal, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's.
Yes, sir.
So at what point do you want us to report water intrusion into the street? As soon as it's coming through the gutters?
What you observe, honestly, there's no bad comment. So if you're observing water into the street, I will say though, the stormwater system itself is a secondary system. So if you have a rainfall event, and it's a heavy rainfall event, we're expecting water in the streets to be carried out into the canal.
We had it yesterday.
Okay.
4 feet at 85th and Riverside. Yeah, about 4 feet right at the curb. So if you want
4 feet of water.
No.
4 feet into the street.
Yeah.
Okay.
Into the street, not height, width, spread.
So 41 in Helene, but it comes through that one right on the corner where that backflow valve is. So it's
Sure.
common. The whole street didn't flood, but if you want photos of that data at the
Yeah.
time, we can do that.
Exactly, because even, we could report depth, but we could estimate that too with the ground data.
Steve's the man down there.
So that 4 feet, good point. So if you're giving that type of image or that type of information, it would be good to give that perspective on the image. So we would know how, I mean, we've seen images of flooding. I mean, that's beyond what
No, like 4 feet is probably 8 inches deep, maybe. I mean,
Yeah.
it's higher than the curb.
It depends on the crossover of the roadway, so essentially, if there's a curb, and you take a picture of the water at the curb line, we know it's 6 inches at this time. So we know, we have something to measure against. That's really, if you take a picture of the distance, it's over the curb, and it's up to the root center of the road, and you take it from a distance, then we know, okay, we can go out and measure it based on the image from here to here, now we know how vertical. And so, I mean, that's the sort of thing that will give us, once you give us perspective, it gives us an ability to react.
I'm hoping that pattern shifted, because I'll be honest with you, I haven't seen the roads flood like they did last year this time.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole freaking intersection would be underwater. The most I've seen is 4 to 6 feet intruded into the roadway, which, hallelujah. I can deal with that, but, you know, it's been a very strange tidal season this spring and winter.
Any other questions?
Anybody?
Thank you all.
Thank
We sincerely appreciate all the guidance and input. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you so much. Can we leave that on a second? All right. Set this down in case something else comes up. I will say, if you don't have the C-Click Fix app on your phone, I do highly recommend it. You can take the picture directly in the app, and it will timestamp it when you do that. And you have to put your name in. You can't be anonymous anymore after they changed that state law a couple of years ago, so.
That's not-
That's not true for this?
That's not true.
Okay, cause I know a lot of them get kicked out for that.
If you're doing
Is
a
that just
codes,
codes?
if you're
That's
doing
codes, though, right?
codes, if you do a
Yeah.
codes complaint, you have to put your name and address.
Yeah.
But you can be anonymous if you want to. If not,
Right.
just be yourself, really.
What is the app?
It's called C-Click Fix, and if you go to the city's website and in the search bar, type C-Click Fix, it'll give you a link to download the app. And.
That's where you want all that data going?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
That's where
'Cause
we
that-
put it.
I'll
That's-
send out a link to everybody with it. There was a little in our newsletter, a little
Yeah.
blurb about using it, or you can call, but if you can timestamp it, especially in the areas where you guys are seeing the most flooding, send your pictures a lot of times, but yeah, that's really great, so.
And we're held accountable to that timeline. So as soon as you put it in, council, I know, I talk to Kim often about secret fix requests,
Yeah.
as well as administration.
Vanessa and
They-
I are C-Click Fix's highest users in the review categories.
Yeah.
We keep massive spreadsheets of
I'll be like,
notes of
"Hey,
all
Kat,
the things that happen in it.
Nothing's
Yeah.
happening on this, what else do you know? So
Correct.
we do try and keep up. It was one of the tools that, as opposed to asking you guys to submit it there and then tell me and then do that, if people send them to me, I will submit them. If there's enough information, otherwise, I love seeing the volume increase that the neighborhood has done since Helene of C-Click Fix. I think it's really important. So, is there anyone else that would like to speak this evening? Okay, and is there any other issues that anybody in the membership needed to bring up tonight? I know most of us were here to hear about infrastructure, so.
I got my newsletter,
Mhm.
but my parents are in Ingrid's area and
Okay.
they didn't get their newsletter yet.
Okay.
Is Ingrid still doing that or is someone else?
Gail's been doing it for her.
Okay, it didn't come out yet for
Oh.
the Tallahassee Drive Northeast.
Okay, well, Tony is our coordinator for that, so you get with her and we'll make sure that happens.
Yeah, I
I'm
gave
sorry
them
to hear
mine, so
that.
they have that.
Okay, well, I have a couple extras out front, if you want a physical copy to take with you tonight, otherwise, they're with the delivery person. Or always online, RivieraBasinPeak.org is our website, and it is up there digital, you can scroll through it, and I did try and make it so when there were areas that like had links, if you actually click them in the newsletter, it'll just take you to the website in the digital version. So we're trying to get more technology friendly, so. Well, I want to thank everybody so much for coming out tonight, if there's nothing else. And thank you so much to everybody from the city for their time and for putting together this presentation. And Saturday trying to get
Don't forget to take your trees.
Yes, get a tree.